I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the medicine cabinet and saw the empty space where my heart pills should have been. At 73 years old, you develop certain rhythms. You know the weight of your coffee mug, the creak of the third stair, the exact position of the pill bottle you reach for every single morning at 7 a.m. When something shifts, even by inches, your body registers it like a discordant note in a familiar song. The bottle was gone, not misplaced, not knocked over. Gone, and the silence in my kitchen that morning felt heavier than any sound could have been. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, this story is for you. Subscribe now, because what the pharmacy records revealed will leave you speechless. I stood there with the cabinet door open, my hand still extended toward the empty shelf, feeling my pulse quicken in that way it does when my body remembers it needs something I can no longer give it. The morning light slanted through the window above the sink, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air, those tiny witnesses to my confusion. "Margaret," my daughter-in-law's voice came from behind me, sugary and light. "What are you looking for?" I turned to find Vanessa standing in my kitchen doorway, her yoga mat tucked under one arm, her smile bright and practiced. She had a key to my house. Michael had insisted on it 6 months ago, just in case. At the time, it had seemed like a kindness. Now that key felt like something else entirely. "My medication," I said simply. "It's not here." She set down her yoga mat and walked toward me with that careful, measured gait people use around the elderly, as if we might shatter at any sudden movement. Her perfume, something floral and expensive, arrived before she did. "Oh, Margaret," she peered into the cabinet, her brow furrowing with theatrical concern. "You probably just finished the bottle and forgot. It happens at your age." At your age, the words landed like small stones, each one carefully placed to build a wall of doubt around my own perception. "I didn't finish it," I said quietly. "I counted the pills 3 days ago. There were 21 left." Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind her eyes, quick as a camera flash, then gone. "Well, maybe you miscounted, or maybe you took more than you thought." She reached out and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, we'll get you a refill today." She said "we" as if my medication were a shared responsibility, as if my body were a project she and Michael managed together. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist that my mind still worked perfectly well, that I remembered exactly how many pills were in that bottle because I checked them every Sunday night as part of my routine. But arguing would only make me look like what she was suggesting I was: confused, forgetful, slipping. "Drop a comment and tell me your city. I want to know I'm not alone in understanding that terrible feeling of being doubted in your own home." So instead, I nodded and thanked her for her concern. She lingered for a moment, her eyes scanning my kitchen as if checking for other signs of my supposed decline. Then she kissed my cheek, her lips cool and quick, and promised to call Michael. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table listening to the refrigerator's low hum, the way it cycled on and off like my own uncertain heartbeat. The house felt different somehow, smaller, less mine. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling the slight irregularity there, the flutter that reminded me why those pills mattered. My cardiologist had been clear: missing even a few doses could be dangerous. "This isn't aspirin, Margaret," he'd said during my last appointment. "Your heart needs this, consistently." But Vanessa had said accident, and maybe she was right. Maybe I had finished the bottle and forgotten. Maybe my memory was playing tricks the way everyone seemed to expect it to at my age, except I didn't feel forgetful. I felt watched. I tried to rest that afternoon, but my body kept reminding me of its need. A heaviness in my chest, a slight dizziness when I stood too quickly, the sense that my heart was working harder than it should. I counted the hours until the pharmacy reopened, each minute stretching like taffy. When I finally walked those 3 blocks to Greenfield Pharmacy, slower than I used to, pausing at the corner where the sidewalk dips, my legs felt unsteady. Not from weakness, from anticipation. The pharmacist, a gentle woman named Rita who'd filled my prescriptions for 15 years, greeted me with that particular kindness people reserve for the very old. I suppose at 73, with my silver hair and my careful steps, I'd crossed into that category. "Hi, Mrs. Callahan," she said warmly. "What can I help you with today?" "I need a refill," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. "My medication seems to be missing." She typed something into her computer, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, then her brow furrowed. "Missing, but Mrs. Callahan, it was canceled." the word didn't register at first. Canceled? Yes. She turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to read, but enough to show me she wasn't making this up. Through the online portal 4 days ago, Vanessa had come by unannounced. She'd insisted on helping me organize my medicine cabinet, moving things I didn't ask her to move, lingering over that drawer longer than it took to straighten a few bottles. I'd gone to answer the phone in the other room, leaving her alone in my bathroom for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I didn't cancel anything, I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. I don't even use the online portal. Rita's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Well, someone did. The timestamp shows it was done from a registered device at 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday. 2:47 p.m. I'd been on the phone with my sister, Louise, discussing her grandson's graduation. Vanessa had been alone in my bathroom. Have you ever felt the exact moment your world tilted? Comment below, because what happened next proves I wasn't imagining things. I stood there at the pharmacy counter, feeling the floor shift beneath my orthopedic shoes, not from weakness, from clarity, a terrible, unwelcome clarity. Can you print the activity log?" I asked quietly. Rita hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then nodded. "Let me get the pharmacist in charge." Mr. Chen appeared from the back, a man I'd known for a decade who'd once stayed late to fill my prescription on Christmas Eve when I'd run out unexpectedly. He looked at the screen, then at me, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Not recognition of me, but recognition of a pattern he'd probably seen before. "Mrs. Callahan," he said gently, "let me print this for you. And I'm going to make a note in your file that all future changes require in-person verification." The printout was warm in my hands when he gave it to me. 3 pages of activity, times, dates, device IDs. All the digital fingerprints of someone who'd been managing my healthcare without my knowledge. I thanked them and walked home slowly, carrying those pages like evidence of a crime I hadn't yet named. When I reached my house, I sat at the kitchen table and spread the papers before me. The late afternoon sun stretched across them in golden bars, and I traced each line with my finger, seeing the pattern emerge. 7 login attempts over the past month. 4 successful, all from a device that wasn't mine. Prescriptions refilled early, then canceled, then refilled again, and every date, every single timestamp corresponded with a day Vanessa had been in my home. I felt something settle in my chest then, not panic, not fear, something colder and clearer, certainty. Vanessa hadn't hidden my pills by accident, she'd been doing it deliberately, but why? The question haunted me through a sleepless night. I lay in my bed, the same bed I'd shared with Edward for 42 years before he died, and listened to the house settle around me. Every creak felt amplified. Every shadow seemed to shift with purpose. Why would Vanessa want me without my medication? The answer whispered through my mind in fragments: control, dependency, incompetence, inheritance. I pushed that last word away, but it crept back like fog under a door. Michael was my only child. In this house, this modest 3-bedroom with its paid-off mortgage and its location in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly, as the real estate agents liked to say, this house would be his someday. But not yet, not while I was still capable of living independently, unless I became incapable. If your heart is racing, hit that subscribe button, because what I discovered next changed everything. I got up at dawn, my body moving on autopilot. The pills I'd been able to get from the pharmacy, an emergency week's supply while they sorted out the cancellation, sat in a new bottle on my nightstand. I took one with water, feeling it slide down my throat like a promise that my heart would keep beating at least one more day. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went to my desk and pulled out the small notebook Edward had given me years ago. "For your thoughts," he'd written on the inside cover in his careful handwriting. I'd never used it, saving it for something important. This qualified. I wrote down everything: the dates Vanessa had visited, the dates the pharmacy showed activity, the things she'd said about my confusion, my forgetfulness, my age. I wrote down the way Michael had started looking at me lately, with concern instead of confidence, with pity instead of respect. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the morning light had fully arrived and the first birds began their territorial songs outside my window. When I finished, I had a timeline, a pattern, evidence, but evidence of what exactly? That my daughter-in-law was, what, trying to make me sick, trying to make me look incompetent. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m., sharp and insistent. I already knew who it would be. Vanessa stood on my porch with a bag from the expensive organic grocery store 2 towns over. Her smile was radiant, her outfit coordinated, cream-colored yoga pants and a soft pink sweater that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. "Good morning," she chirped. "I thought I'd bring you some groceries. You mentioned last week you were running low." I didn't remember mentioning any such thing. I let her in because refusing would have seemed strange, paranoid, another sign of the decline she was so carefully documenting. She moved through my kitchen with practiced ease, putting away items I hadn't requested. Organic kale, quinoa, expensive almond butter, foods I'd never bought for myself, foods that would sit in my pantry untouched until she could point to them as more evidence. "See, she's not eating properly, she's not taking care of herself." "I went to the pharmacy yesterday," I said, watching her arrange apples in a bowl I'd pulled from the back of the cabinet. Her hands paused just for a heartbeat, then continued their work. "Oh good, did they sort everything out?" "They said my prescription was canceled through the online portal." "How strange," her voice was light, unconcerned. "Those systems are so confusing, you probably clicked something without realizing." There it was again, you probably, without realizing, the gentle erosion of my competence, one word at a time. "I don't use the online portal," I said, keeping my voice level. "I don't even have the app on my phone." She turned to face me, and for just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it, something cold flashed across her features. Then the warm smile returned. "Well, these things glitch all the time. The important thing is you got your medication, right?" She stepped closer, touching my arm with those cool, manicured fingers. "You did get it, didn't you?" "You haven't been without it?" "I got an emergency supply," I said. "Emergency supply," she frowned. "That sounds dramatic. Margaret, are you sure you're not overthinking this? Michael and I have been worried about your stress levels." "Stress can affect memory, you know. Comment, gaslight if you see what she's doing, because it gets worse." I watched her face as she spoke, cataloging every microexpression, the slight tightness around her eyes when I'd mentioned the pharmacy. The way her smile didn't quite reach those eyes, the calculating pause before each carefully crafted sentence. This woman had done her research. She knew exactly how to make me doubt myself while appearing concerned. "I'm not stressed," I said quietly. "I'm aware." Something shifted in the air between us. A subtle acknowledgement that we were no longer pretending not to understand each other. "Aware of what?" she asked, her tone sharpening just slightly. "That someone has been accessing my pharmacy account, that my medications have been tampered with, that every incident corresponds with your visits." The silence that followed was like glass, thin, fragile, ready to shatter. Vanessa's expression cycled through surprise, hurt, and finally landed on wounded compassion. It was masterful, really. She should have been an actress. "Margaret," she sighed, shaking her head slowly. "This is exactly what Michael and I have been worried about. You're seeing patterns that aren't there. You're becoming paranoid." She pulled out her phone. "I think I need to call Michael. This is getting serious." "I have the logs," I said. "The pharmacy printed them for me." Her thumb hovered over her phone's screen. "Logs, every login, every change, timestamps, device IDs." I kept my voice steady, watching the calculation happen behind her eyes. "Would you like to see them?" She lowered her phone slowly. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sugary coating. "You know what I think? I think you're a lonely old woman who's looking for drama because you can't accept that you're not needed anymore." She grabbed her purse. "I've been trying to help you, we both have, but if you're going to accuse me of whatever this is, then maybe you should manage on your own." She walked to the door, then turned back. "I'll tell Michael you're having some kind of episode. He'll know what to do." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like a threat. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the organic groceries I hadn't wanted, and felt my heart do that irregular flutter that reminded me how fragile this body had become. But my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I walked to my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote down every word of our conversation. Then I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew would believe me. Louise answered on the second ring. My older sister, still sharp at 76, living in Florida with her second husband and her collection of true crime podcasts. "Maggie," she always called me Maggie, even though I'd been Margaret to everyone else for decades. What's wrong? You sound strange. I told her everything. The missing pills, the pharmacy logs, Vanessa's calculated concern. As I spoke, I could hear Louise's breathing change, quickening with anger. That manipulative little, she caught herself. Okay, listen to me. This is elder abuse, medication tampering. You need to document everything and call Adult Protective Services. I can't do that, I said quickly. Michael would never forgive me. It would destroy their marriage. Their marriage? Louise's voice rose. Maggie, she's trying to make you incompetent, don't you see? She gets you to miss enough doses, you have a cardiac episode, you end up in the hospital confused and weak, and suddenly Michael's convinced you can't live alone. Then what? Nursing home, selling this house, getting power of attorney? The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark because deep down I'd already thought them all. You need a lawyer, Louise continued. Not tomorrow, today. And you need to tell Michael what's happening before she can spin this into more evidence of your confusion. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because the confrontation that's coming will shock you. After I hung up with Louise, I sat in the quiet of my living room looking at the framed photos on the mantel. Michael as a boy, gap-toothed and grinning, Michael graduating college. Michael's wedding to Vanessa 3 years ago, a lavish affair at a vineyard where she'd insisted on white peonies and a string quartet. I'd liked her then. She'd seemed polished, ambitious, put together. She'd called me Mom from the first day, though it had felt slightly forced, like she was trying on a role. Now I wondered if it had all been a performance, a long-term investment in a future inheritance. The thought made me sick. I picked up my phone and called Michael's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Michael Callahan. Please leave a message. Michael, it's your mother. I need to talk to you about something important. Please call me back as soon as you can. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. He didn't call back that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, he showed up at my door with Vanessa beside him, her hand on his arm, her expression a perfect mask of concern. Mom, Michael said, and his voice was gentle in that terrible way that meant he was about to treat me like a child. Van told me about your concerns about the pharmacy. Can we come in and talk? I stepped aside, letting them enter. Michael looked tired, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He worked long hours at his architectural firm, coming home to a wife who probably filled his ears with worries about his declining mother. We sat in my living room, me in Edward's old chair, them on the couch across from me like an intervention committee. Mom, Michael began, Vanessa says you've been having some confusion about your medications. That you accused her of, he paused, clearly uncomfortable. Of tampering with them? I didn't accuse, I said calmly. I stated facts. My medication was canceled through the online portal on days when Vanessa was here. The pharmacy has records. Vanessa's hand tightened on Michael's arm. Margaret, we've been over this. Those systems make mistakes all the time, and you've been so stressed lately. I'd like to see your phone, I interrupted. Both of them stared at me. What? Vanessa asked. Your phone. If you didn't access my pharmacy account, there won't be any record of it on your device. Will there? Michael stood up. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't what? Ask to verify the truth? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised who'd once trusted me implicitly. Michael, I have the pharmacy logs. They show logins from an unregistered device at times when Vanessa was here alone with me. All I'm asking is for her to show that her phone wasn't that device. This is insane, Vanessa said, standing. Michael, your mother is having paranoid delusions. This is textbook dementia behavior. I don't have dementia, I said firmly. I have a daughter-in-law who's been systematically gaslighting me, and I have documentation to prove it. Drop a proof in the comments if you want to see those pharmacy records, because what happened next was the turning point. Michael looked between us, his face pale, conflict written in every line of his body. This was his wife and his mother, and he desperately wanted to believe we were both wrong, that this was all a misunderstanding. Show her your phone, Van, he said quietly. What? Vanessa's voice was sharp now, the mask slipping. You can't be serious. You're going to take her side. She's clearly not well. Just show her, Michael said. If there's nothing there, we can all move past this. For a long moment, Vanessa didn't move. Her face had gone rigid, her eyes calculating rapidly. Then she laughed, a brittle, artificial sound. I don't have to prove anything. This is ridiculous. She grabbed her purse. Michael, I'll be in the car. When you're done indulging your mother's delusions, we can go. She walked out, her heels clicking sharply on my hardwood floors. Michael sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Mom, what's happening? Why would Van do something like this? I moved to sit beside him, my joints protesting, and put my hand on his shoulder the way I used to when he was small and the world felt too big. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know what I saw and I know my mind is still sound. I handed him the pharmacy printouts I'd kept in my desk. Look at these. Really look at them? He studied the pages, his finger tracing the timeline I'd already memorized. I watched his face as understanding slowly dawned, not full acceptance, but the first crack in his certainty. These dates, he said slowly, these are all times she's been here. Yes, but that could be coincidence, Michael. I stopped him gently. How many coincidences make a pattern? He was quiet for a long time. Then he folded the papers carefully and slipped them into his jacket pocket. I need to think about this. That's all I ask, I said. After he left, I sat in the darkening living room and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. Not because the problem was solved, but because my son had finally looked at the evidence instead of just listening to the narrative his wife had been crafting. 2 days passed in heavy silence. I took my medication with religious precision, checking and rechecking the count. I wrote everything in my notebook. I waited. On the 3rd day, Michael came alone. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed, his movements restless. He sat across from me without preamble. I checked her phone, he said quietly. While she was in the shower, I found the pharmacy app. Your account was saved in it. He looked up at me and I saw something break behind his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice steady. You believed what you were told. She's very good at being convincing. Why? He asked, and his voice cracked. Why would she do this? I chose my words carefully. I think she wanted to create a narrative that I was declining, forgetting things, unable to care for myself. Once that narrative was established, power of attorney, he finished, understanding flooding his face. God, she's been pushing me for weeks to talk to you about giving me power of attorney. She said it was just practical planning, but he stood up, pacing. The house, she's been talking about this house constantly. About how much it's worth, about how the neighborhood is up and coming, about how we could. He stopped, looking sick. Comment your biggest fear about aging, because Michael's about to learn a hard truth about the person he married. What do I do? He asked, and he sounded young, like the boy who used to come to me with his problems. That's not for me to decide, I said gently, but I will tell you this. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. You need to decide if you can ever look at her again without wondering what else she's capable of. He nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. I need some time. Take all the time you need, I said. But Michael, change the emergency key code and ask for your key back. He looked at me, startled, then nodded. I will. Today, after he left, I went to my medicine cabinet and looked at the bottle of pills sitting exactly where they belonged. I'd won this battle, but I knew deep in my bones that the war wasn't over. Vanessa was smart, calculated, patient. She wouldn't take this defeat quietly. I was right. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door at 6 a.m. When I opened it, still in my bathrobe, I found 2 police officers standing on my porch. Mrs. Margaret Callahan? The older one asked. Yes, we received a welfare check request. Your daughter-in-law called, concerned that you might be a danger to yourself. She says you've been displaying erratic behavior and making unfounded accusations. My heart sank. Of course. If you can't make someone look incompetent through medical manipulation, you call in authorities who can officially document mental instability. Officers, I said, keeping my voice calm despite my racing pulse, I'm perfectly fine. Would you like to come in? They exchanged a glance, then nodded. I led them to my living room, grateful I'd been documenting everything, grateful I'd called Louise, grateful I'd told Michael. Ma'am, your daughter-in-law mentioned you've been having paranoid delusions about her, the younger officer said, his pen poised over a notebook. Accusations of medication tampering, not delusions, I said firmly. Documentation? I retrieved my notebook and the pharmacy printouts. This is a timeline of unauthorized access to my pharmacy account, corresponding with dates my daughter-in-law had access to my home. The pharmacy confirmed these weren't authorized by me. The officers studied the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. "Has your doctor been notified about this?" the older officer asked. "Not yet. But I have an appointment scheduled. And your son, is he aware?" "He is. He confronted his wife about it 2 days ago," the younger officer made notes. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks like potential elder abuse. Would you be willing to file a formal complaint?" I hesitated. Filing a complaint would make this official, public. It would force Michael to choose sides in a way he might never recover from. But the alternative was allowing Vanessa to paint me as unstable, to use the police report to build her case that I couldn't be trusted. "Yes," I said firmly, "I would." They took my statement, gave me a case number, and promised to follow up. As they left, the older officer paused. "Ma'am, keep documenting everything. People don't like to believe these things happen, but they do, more often than you'd think." After they left, I called Michael immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Mom, are you okay? Van just told me she called for a welfare check. She said you threatened her." "I never threatened anyone," I said calmly. "The officers came, reviewed my documentation, and advised me to file an elder abuse complaint." Silence on the other end. "Michael, I filed for separation this morning," he said quietly, "and for a restraining order. My lawyer says with your evidence and the pharmacy logs we have a strong case." His voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I brought her into your life, into our lives. I should have seen." "You saw when it mattered," I interrupted gently. "That's what counts." Hit subscribe if this story is giving you chills, because the final confrontation is coming. The restraining order was granted 3 days later. Temporary, pending a full hearing, but enough to keep Vanessa away from my home and away from me. Michael moved out of their shared apartment and into a temporary rental. The divorce papers were filed, and slowly, carefully, my life began to return to something like normal. But normal was different now. I'd learned things about vulnerability, about trust, about how easily the system can be manipulated against the elderly. I'd also learned things about my own strength. On a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the police visit, I received a call from the pharmacy. "Mrs. Callahan, this is Rita. I wanted to let you know someone tried to access your account again this morning." My blood went cold. "What?" "Don't worry," she said quickly. "The new security measures blocked it, and the system captured the device information. I've already notified the police with your case number." "Was it?" "The device was registered to Vanessa Callahan. She tried 3 times. Even with a restraining order, even with everything documented, she'd tried again." That's when I understood. Some people can't accept losing control. Some people would rather burn it all down than admit defeat. I called Michael immediately. He answered with dread in his voice, as if he'd been waiting for this call. "She's not going to stop," I said simply. "I know," he sighed heavily. "My lawyer says she's been contacting my office, calling my colleagues, trying to spin a story that I'm the one who's unstable, that you manipulated me against her." A pause. "Mom, she's telling people you have dementia." "Then we need to be proactive," I said, making a decision I'd been avoiding. "I'm going to see my doctor, get a full cognitive evaluation, document that I'm of sound mind. And I think you should consider pressing charges." "Charges? For elder abuse, for attempted fraud, whatever the DA says will stick." I took a breath. "Michael, she needs to face real consequences. Otherwise, she'll just find another vulnerable person to target." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're right, I'll call the DA's office today." The cognitive evaluation took 3 hours, memory tests, reasoning puzzles, medical history review. Dr. Patterson, my physician of 15 years, supervised everything. At the end, he closed his folder and looked at me over his reading glasses. "Margaret, your cognitive function is excellent. Better than many people half your age." He paused. "Your daughter-in-law was building a false narrative. I want you to know that as your physician, I would have shut that down immediately if she'd approached me." "Thank you," I said, relief flooding through me. He wrote something on his prescription pad, then handed it to me. It wasn't a prescription, it was a referral. "This is for Dr. Susan Chen. She's a lawyer who specializes in elder law and estate planning. I think you should talk to her about protection orders, about updating your will with specific language, about making sure this never happens again." I took the paper, touched by his concern. "I will." "Good." He stood, helping me up. "And Margaret, don't let this make you bitter. Most people are good, you just happened to meet one who wasn't." 6 months later, I sat in my garden on a warm May morning, watching the roses bloom. They were Edward's roses, the ones he'd planted before he died, and somehow I'd managed to keep them alive all these years. Michael came by every Sunday now. We'd have coffee and talk, really talk, in a way we hadn't since he was young. He'd apologized so many times I'd finally had to tell him to stop. "You didn't do anything wrong," I'd told him. "You loved someone who turned out to be someone else. That's not a crime." The divorce was final. Vanessa had taken a plea deal on the elder abuse charges, probation, community service, mandatory counseling. She'd moved to another state, which was a mercy for all of us. The house was mine, secured with ironclad legal documents that Dr. Chen had helped me draft. Michael was still my beneficiary, but only after my death, and only with protections in place that prevented any spouse of his from accessing the assets. My medication sat in a locked box, a precaution I'd decided to keep. Not because I didn't trust Michael, but because I'd learned that trust is something you verify, not something you assume. The pharmacy had added additional security to my account. Adult Protective Services had closed my case with commendations for how I'd documented everything. And my notebook, that unused gift from Edward, was now full of my handwriting, a complete record of what had happened. I'd written an account of everything, dated and signed, and given copies to Louise, to Michael, and to Dr. Chen. Just in case anyone ever tries to claim I was confused, I'd told them. This is proof that I saw clearly. As I sat there among Edward's roses, I thought about what I'd learned. If this story touched you, please share it. Comment below with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe, because stories like this need to be told. I'd learned that getting old doesn't mean getting weak. That having a good memory means nothing if people are determined not to believe you. That documentation is the difference between being dismissed and being heard. I'd learned that family can betray you, but they can also choose you again. Most importantly, I'd learned that my voice, even at 73, even with a tired heart and slow steps, still mattered. The doorbell rang. Michael, right on time, carrying a bag from the bakery we both loved. "Hey, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. "I brought your favorite, blueberry scones, of course." We sat together in the garden, drinking coffee and eating scones, and for a moment everything felt right again. Not perfect, we'd both been scarred by what happened, but right. "You know what I was thinking," Michael said, brushing crumbs from his shirt. "We should update this garden, add some new plants, maybe build a bench. Make it yours, not just Dad's." I looked at the roses, then at my son, and smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Because that's what you do after surviving something like this. You don't just protect what you have. You build something new, you reclaim your space, your voice, your life, and you make damn sure no one can take it from you again." 1 year later, I received a letter, no return address, postmarked from Nevada. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words in Vanessa's handwriting. I was desperate. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just an explanation that wasn't really an explanation at all. I read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in my file with all the other documentation. Because even this pathetic attempt at justification was part of the record. Then I went to my garden, to the new bench Michael had built, surrounded by roses both old and new, and I sat in the sunshine. I was 74 years old, I had a tired heart and slow steps, but I was here, I was clear. I was free, and I had won. If you or someone you know is experiencing elder abuse, please reach out. National Elder Abuse Hotline 1-800-677-1116. Adult Protective Services. Contact your local office. Your voice matters, your experience is valid, and you deserve to be heard. Subscribe for more stories about resilience, survival, and finding your voice. Comment below, what would you have done in Margaret's situation? Share this story with anyone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let anyone make you doubt your own truth.